Okay. Hey guys, welcome to the Hazy Mornings. This is Terry, and today we're talking about the essence of Zen. Okay, so I'm probably deleting the first video from this channel because it was kind of shitty. So I'll record maybe another introductory video. But for now, I just wanted to share this article that I wrote about the essence of Zen. This channel is gonna deal with topics related to philosophy, spirituality, psychology, etc. So yeah, I'll write in the description maybe a list of the topics that we'll be touching on in the future. But for now, let's get into this one. It's worth noting that I haven't studied Zen in a professional way, but I've been reading about it, and I believe that uh, we can pack Zen in a bite-sized way that makes it easy to approach. So yeah, let's get into it. I'll also be listing the name of my Substack in case you also want to or prefer to read the article. So yeah, it says the essence of Zen, a simple 10-word glossary to familiarize yourself with the abstract teachings of a unique form of spirituality. So, in the introduction, we titled A Softly Traced Map. At first glance, Zen Buddhism seems to be a paradoxical, confusing, or even a highly technical way of approaching spirituality. However, in the midst of this complexity, the Zen tradition ultimately views enlightenment as the achievement of something far simpler. Since Zen monks prefer practice rather than words, they aren't fans of scrutinizing into profound scripture or adopting linguistic labels. So, with this 10-word glossary, I like to unscramble the teachings that have been explored through endless books and media to reorganize them into a fresh, simple, and well integrated perspective so you can begin to navigate the map of Zen practice with clarity and grace. So let's get into the concepts. Concept number 1 is Wabi-Sabi. I decided to start with Wabi-Sabi because while the concept is not fundamental to Zen, it is the embodied reflection of its core ideals. I think that I'm like adding some image in the video to accompany each concept. So Wabi refers to something that is natural, austere, or simple, and Sabi to the beauty that comes with age, wear, and decay. Therefore, Wabi-Sabi is a beauty that emerges from allowing imperfection and nature to be part of the human experience. In Zen monasteries, Wabi-Sabi is implemented by monks in several aspects of life, such as their minimalist possessions, their simple meals, their quiet lifestyle, and their profoundly human community. The concept is deeply spiritual beyond its appliances in design and aesthetics, as it recognizes that life does not need to be sophisticated in order to be perfect, as much as we do not need to evade acknowledging the broken parts of ourselves, for example, for it is by recognition of our suffering where we can start to address our pain with compassion. The concepts of perfection and well being are then rediscovered to their essence, which is less about materialism or luxurious experiences, social status, and more about human connection and empathy. The reason why this concept is representative of Zen culture is because this tradition teaches how to dissolve our conceptions of necessary structure and acknowledge the comforting beauty of true essence. Number 2, we have Mahayana, or the Great Vehicle. There are 3 main traditions in Buddhism. We have Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Zen Buddhism belongs to Mahayana. This tradition emerges around the 1st century AD in response to the former rigid nature of Theravada Buddhism, which is called the Way of the Elders. For being too focused on scrutinizing into esoteric theory to attain nirvana, which is transcendence from the cycle of death and rebirth, and for strictly following the original practices suggested by the Buddha. Mahayana Buddhism then considers the following ideas. 1. Inherent Buddhahood. Mahayana Buddhists believe that Buddha nature is not something you attain, but rather something already present that you uncover. Therefore, every sentient being is capable of dissolving all illusions and experiencing enlightenment in the plane of the living. Two is on pursuit of nirvana. Considering the non-dual nature of enlightenment and the interdependence that exists between all sentient beings, Mahayana Buddhists take a more altruistic approach to spirituality. Their primary goal shifts into following the way of the Bodhisattva, which vows to postpone individual attainment of nirvana until all beings are free from suffering, hence the name of the Great Vehicle. And three is secularism. Since Bodhisattva monks do not focus on attaining nirvana, the scope of Mahayana Buddhism shifts to the practice of well-being in our physical plane of existence, making this version of spirituality more secular than other traditions, which often depend on mysticism to reach a promised form of liberation from suffering. Okay, so the third concept is Satori. The Satori is the conception of enlightenment described by Zen Buddhism as the sudden realization of absolute awareness, awakening, and post-conceptual understanding of the true nature of reality. I didn't write this in the article, but it's worth mentioning that I don't remember the name of the author that I was reading. I think it's Shunryu Suzuki in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, where in the preface they mentioned that he wasn't so focused on Satori itself. While it is an important and essential part of Buddhism, it does not replace the fact that Zen before enlightenment is about all these practices that bring us well-being. So let's keep talking about Satori to really know what it's all about anyways. So even though Satori might seem to be about perspective rather than practices, the clarity changes us in many important aspects of our lives. Here are some of the characteristics of Satori. 1. It's non-dual. Satori involves a profound and intuitive sense of no-self, where the filters of the ego dissolve, allowing one to be radically confluent with their inner and outer experience of reality. 2. It's peaceful. Differing from interpretations of enlightenment described by other traditions, Satori does not induce intense excitement. It just implies a simple and non-mystical experience of clarity and profound calmness. 3. It's sudden. It can occur unexpectedly, being triggered even by the most insignificant event into a flash of insight, rather than through gradual or linear progression. 4. It's permanent. While the initial peak experience may be momentary, it often brings a permanent and transformative shift in perception that changes the way that you interact with reality, which is how you communicate, how you react, how you view adversity, how you think, how you feel, etc. And number 5, it's that it's hard to communicate. Because of its non-dual nature, it cannot be understood through intellectual reasoning or communicated through verbal language. The Zen tradition recognizes the misleading nature of language, where words often replace the experience itself in order to communicate a merely symbolic conception of it. A common Zen analogy warns not to confuse the moon, which would be enlightenment, for the finger that is pointing at it, in this case, words. And number 6 is that it is radical. A Zen monk might be more genuine with their emotions than most spiritual teachers who approach their students with an overly peaceful demeanor and soft, condescending voice. Contrary to popular depictions, you don't lose your Zen by getting angry or vulnerable. You would be rather closer to Zen if you are present with the emotion and experience it fully. The difference is that Zen practitioners are in constant flow with their emotions, enabling them to express them in healthy ways, regulate them, and introspect about them afterwards, rather than just suppressing them. Okay, so concept number 4 is Kensho. Kensho is basically a demo of Satori, but it is very important still. And it is widely defined as seeing one's true nature. While Satori is a permanent, irreversible state of enlightenment, Kensho is a sudden experience of insight that allows us to see what Satori is all about. It might not be as intense or permanent, but it gives us a glimpse of what it means to see reality clear of filters. And I should add, besides what I wrote here, that it comes with a teaching that shows us something about life that we can practice, of course, before even attaining Satori. So, the reason why a Kensho experience does not extend itself into permanent or absolute enlightenment is because it might come as a very specific spiritual revelation and not the whole understanding in its purest form. Whether it comes as a dissolution of a layer from the ego, a non-dual experience of interconnectedness and human empathy, or feeling a refreshing, profound gratitude about seeing our children smile, Kensho is a sign of where our soul truly resides. Okay, so concept number 5 is the koan. Koans are paradoxical or counterintuitive riddles, questions, stories, and even actions that focus on triggering spiritual insight. Being the most characteristic tools in Zen Buddhism, their main goal is to challenge the perceptions that blur our experience of reality. Zen Buddhism recognizes that the path towards enlightenment contains a lot of questions, confusions, and illusions. And while other traditions such as Theravada try to provide a preconceived structure for this journey, preconceived structure, the way of Zen considers that dependence on doctrines, instructions, and scripture leads to introjection, which is adopting ideas, values, or behaviors without truly understanding them. Then, instead of offering teachings, Zen masters will ask you these weird riddles that make you have to think a little further in order to transcend this introjection. They're also experts at thinking in radical ways, so they might often come up with tailored koan-like teachings for their students on the go. It's almost like Socrates' meiotics. Correct me if anyone is here, if just somebody knows more about Socrates. But it's like Socrates' meiotics is the way I see it, but integrating non-linear logic, embodied cognition, and non-dual linguistic patterns, phenomenological inquiry, and direct experience instead of only words. So, Koans are meant to be meditated by the student instead of having definitive answers. But for the sake of demonstration, let's provide some popular koans and my personal interpretations of them. So the first one here is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? The lesson here will not be found in the answer that we provide for the koan, but rather in the practice of questioning the logic of the koan itself. With this, we learn to deconstruct the linguistic structure of the problems presented to us, which becomes a powerful tool for avoiding indoctrination. By providing no answer and questioning the structure instead, we are not avoiding logic, we are learning to use non-linear logic. And the second one here is, without speaking, without silence, how can you express the truth? I believe that this one invites us to consider communication beyond words. It allows us to recognize that body language and actions often speak louder than words. Adopting a style of communication that does not depend on words, which are symbols, allows us to embody our ideals, experience reality without the dual filters of rationality, and empathize emotionally with the people who share the present moment with us. Now, the third one says, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, which is by Master Linji Jixuan. This one was controversial among his peers in his time, but he just used it to stimulate his students intellectually. It does not refer to killing an incarnation of the Buddha, but rather to dissolve society's conception of an ideal path to enlightenment and dare to craft our own. Okay, so number 6 is Sho-shin. Translating as beginner's mind, it refers to the capability of approaching life with openness, eagerness, and a lack of preconceptions, even when we believe ourselves to be experts. This allows us to have fresh, healthy insights and is often described as a characteristic of non dual states of mind, where everything seems as it's being experienced for the first time. I'd like to add here, again, besides the paragraph, that um, while Zen might seem to be a lot about logic, I think I talked about this a little bit in the intro. Um, it's more about deconstructing logic and learning to use our emotions and access a more essential part of our souls. So I like this popular Zen story that illustrates it in maybe a comforting way. So we have that Nanin, a Japanese master during the Meiji era, received an academic professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nanin served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring. The professor watched the overflow until he no longer could restrain himself. It's over full, no more will go in. Like this cup, Nanin said. You are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? So, yeah, it's a very illustrative story, very classical in Zen culture. Today, even neurologists have recognized the term fluid intelligence as their brain's capability of adapting to new experiences rather than relying merely on learned patterns, which is called crystallized intelligence for every task. It's mostly reflected in neuroplasticity, which is the brain's capability of creating new neural connections, which is abundant in children's development and healthy in adult life. So another example that triggers high neuroplasticity is the reduction of activity in the default mode network as a result of taking psychedelics or during deep meditation states. The default mode network is basically a web of neurons in the brain that is in charge of regulating the communication from all other areas of the brain. When it's turned off, all those areas start communicating freely and generating neuroplasticity as the brain adapts to a new way of experiencing life. It's as if the brain loses a narrator that filters the lived experience. And that's why neuroscientists state that the default mode network regulates functions of the ego. When we experience reality without these filters, we perceive it as it is, something that can lead to Kensho states. Hallucinations are often actually a reflection of what is left of our ego trying to make sense of the inner and outer experience. So the experience of clarity depends on how developed the person's mind is. We also have this concept, neo-nanshin, a similar term. It describes a flexible, adaptable, and non-judgmental state of mind. Therefore, Sho-shin can lead to constant states of neo-nanshin. Okay, concept number 7 is Mu. Before going into how it's used in Zen, it is important to understand the nature of the word. English speakers usually try to just translate mu from Japanese to English as nothing, no, does not, none, or without. But it's simply better to approach it as any concept without a direct translation and understand it for its whole definition. For example, the word Gestalt from German translates as an entire sentence, meaning an organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts. Mu is not a definitive no or a yes. It is a prefix coming originally from Chinese as wu, often combined with the words to reflect the absence of something. A few examples from a wide variety include, and I am not reading the Chinese words here because they're listed in the article, but I cannot pronounce them. But we have words like bored, we have words like regardless of, words like doesn't matter or indifferent, words like wireless or drone, which translates as no person machine, or being very speechless. Okay, so in English, there are several similar prefixes and suffixes. Take D for declutter, on for undone, in for informal, or less for fearless. The use of Wu in Zen culture originates from the story of Chinese master Joshu, also reading as Zazu. In the story, a monk once asked Joshu, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" And Joshu simply said Wu, which could almost translate as doesn't have, but not quite. The koan challenges the fundamental ideas of Mahayana, as according to this tradition, every sentient being has Buddha nature. Yet Joshu dares to dismiss the matter entirely with an answer that invites us to reflect on the non-dual nature of consciousness, or perhaps instead about the useless tendency to scrutinize about consciousness in order to find enlightenment. Or perhaps even a bit of both, being this kind of non-dual, right? So I guess to that we can also answer Wu. Zen monks often meditate deeply on the concept of Mu in order to connect with emptiness and grasp the non-dual nature that underlies consciousness, just as trying to convey what a simple sensation such as hot or cold feels like to an AI chatbot. Just like trying to explain something basic to a robot, right? Mu is an experience that you can only live through rather than understand by using verbal language. So the eighth concept here is gonna be Mu-shin, which also contains the word mu, and shin, which is mind. So now in this word, mu stands for the absence of, and shi stands for mind. In Zen practice, the absence of mind does not mean to just be empty-headed. It is a state of thought-free awareness where the logical processing is lowered in order to access total contact to the present moment. It can be used for practical situations like achieving peak performance in any discipline, like sports, arts, professional skills, etc. For being in constant emotional flow and approaching new experiences intuitively. However, it is also influential in esoteric practice, like for uncovering insights into non-dual states of being. It's important to distinguish it from other common states of mind so we can make the best out of this practice. So the first one would be flow state, right? This state is achieved mostly when there has been practice to an expert level. Mu-shin, on the other hand, is an untapped intuition without the need of previous contact to the skill. Almost like Mozart approaching a piano when he was a child before learning theory. He could simply play it. And I stole that phrase from Good Will Hunting. In an emotional level, it can look like untapping authentic charisma without needing to read and practice rules. Now, the other concept that is similar is Wu Wei, and this one comes from Chinese and also contains the word Wu, which means effortless action, okay? So Wu Wei comes from Taoism and it emphasizes aligning with the natural flow of life to avoid unnecessary striving. Mu-shin focuses on a mental state free from fear, ego, or cognitive interference. They're quite similar, but Wu Wei has more lifestyle qualities, while Mu-shin is often applied to the present moment. It's a cognitive state. Now, Sho-shin is more epistemic. It's about keeping a humble and open mind to new knowledge. And Mu-shin is about dropping the logical filter to access intuition. And we'll see later how this applies during meditation. So, just right now, concept number 9 is Zazen and Shikantaza. This is where the name Zen comes from. Za means sit, and Zen is Japanese translation for the Sanskrit word dhyana, which means meditation. Therefore, Zazen means seated meditation. It's normally practiced as sitting upright with the hands positioned in a Zen mudra, But modern masters emphasize that the essence of Zazen is not necessarily to even sit. So having freedom in posture is more valuable to create the habit of meditation and focus on the true purpose of this practice. So let's briefly distill the essence of Zazen. Among the diverse spectrum of meditation styles from other traditions like counted breathing exercises, body scans for relaxation, walking meditation, mindfulness, yoga, vipassana, mantra repetition, guided visualization, etc., Zazen has a purpose of focusing on breathing, calming the mind, contemplating a koan, or connecting to the essence of Mu. For Zazen, the simple act of having a dedicated time to relax lets the unconscious mind transfer thoughts and neural energy without using logical thought as a mediator, which is a characteristic of Mu-shin, right? This state of free association allows for the mental noise to flow and reorganize itself into mental clarity. And most importantly, it also reinforces brain plasticity to access this state of clarity and calmness during daily situations. So, yeah, not only in meditation, not only to relax for a brief moment. So, now Shikantaza is a subset of Zazen. It comes from the Soto Zen tradition, and its meaning translates as just sitting. The purpose is not to meditate on a koan or breathing exercises. Shikantaza is about being fully present and aware without any specific object of focus, goal, or technique. Another state of mind that can be compared to this free association achieved during Zazen or Shikantaza is Hishiryo. It's about thinking with the entire body and being, since cognitive energy is also transferred through all the neurons in the body. In Hishiryo, instead of forcing thoughts away, you simply notice them and return to the present, allowing them to pass like clouds. And finally, we get to concept number 10, which is the Ensō, which is the Zen circle. The Ensō circle is both a symbol and a meditative practice that you can try yourself. It has a lot of meaning because it symbolizes and even embodies many principles of Zen at once. And I love it because it's a very simple symbol with charged with a lot of meaning. Let's look at how each one is conveyed. So, Mu-shin. The circle is drawn with a loose grip, usually with ink, which is messy, and in a single exhalation. This means that the end result is going to be pretty irregular, and that's fine. That allows us to be fully present in the experience as we draw, and the circle captures the raw state of being in which we were during the attempt. So the second one here is Wabi-Sabi. Because it is drawn in a single brush stroke and not modified after being made, it allows us to practice patience and acceptance of imperfection as we learn to enjoy the result of pure human touch. Then we have Mu. It's often left open or incomplete, which also teaches us to be comfortable with emptiness and to acknowledge the start and the end of open cycles. And then we have meditation. It is done daily and it focuses on the process more than the result. Taking this practice with a deep breath helps us kickstart the day with a reminder of self-awareness, calmness, and peace. So, to conclude, being in Zen is one gem among many other forms of secular spirituality, like applied psychology, secular religions, applied philosophy, spiritual naturalism, or any framework that helps us reconnect with our essence in the journey of finding a better quality of life. So I hope some of the concepts presented here resonated with you guys, and if you already knew about Zen, I hope that this minimalist map served to make it easier to understand. In this case, thank you for watching, and yeah, that concludes the article, the video, and at the same time, I'm just really excited that at least I'm recording some content here because I had thought too much about what I wanted to publish. I guess that just reading an article for now feels good. But of course, I want to turn this channel into more dedicated content, more, I guess, YouTube friendly kind of stuff. Right now, I guess that this is just enjoyable as some podcast to leave in the background or something. But yeah, I'm just really thankful for anyone who stuck around, and yeah, let me know, guys, what do you think about the topic or about the channel. If you guys would like to suggest a topic that we can talk about here, as I said, I will be listing in the description like what kind of topics we'll be touching on in the future. So I'm not good at recording outros, so just thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. We'll see each other on the next one. Yep. So bye. See ya.